Sherdog.com here with Campbell McLaren, the executive producer of the first 22 Ultimate Fighting Championships. And Campbell, it's been 20 years now since the UFC got its start. WOW Productions with Art Davey. You had Horian in the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu group, and Sophomore Entertainment, SEG, with you and Bob Meyerowitz.
SEG was a pay-per-view company that did a lot of music programming. They were half owned by Bertelsmann, by BMG, which is a very big German music company. And Bob Meyerowitz, who owned the other half, was a longtime music producer. And they'd done a lot of big concerts, and they had lost a ton of money on all of them. But Bertelsmann was well-heeled, and they kept pouring money into it, and they kept losing money. So my job as the head of original programming was to find non-music stuff. So we did some comedy, which worked very, very well. I was looking into a lot of unusual stuff before Art called. And I had done a horror magic show with a band called Iron Maiden, and I found this guy that was a sort of a weird, it was weirder than Penn and Teller, weirder than Chris Angel, and he kind of like chopped people up, dismembered people, and we did a magic show with him and Iron Maiden. It was pretty good. We did comedian Andrew Dice Clay, who was banned everywhere. So what I was looking for were things with a built-in audience that we could do more than one of. Problem with music is it lost money, and there's no follow-up anyway, right? So we were trying to find things that were a series. And one day, I answered my own phone. I don't know why. Because, I like talking to lunatics, I guess. And one day this guy called and, "Hi, Campbell, I'm Art Davey. I've been turned down by HBO. I've been turned down by Showtime. Everybody's turned me down. You're the last guy left." I was like, "Oh, that's a hell of a pitch, man. Tell me you call me last." But, Art is charming. And Art is the fastest talker on the planet. So I'm trying to hang up, and Art is going, "Oh, it's called the War of the Worlds. It's great. Anybody will fight it. The Gracies are the greatest thing." And, he said enough that it was interesting. And so we kept talking. He came out to see me, I think it was in April 20 years ago, 1993. And in June, Horian came out to meet me. And Art and Horian had this idea called War of the Worlds. And people have criticized Horian for saying it was just a showcase for Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and it was, but they kicked everybody's ass. The showcase, it was pretty open. Horian came and said that they would fight anyone. We could pick them, he could pick them, Art could pick them, we all could pick them. They would fight anyone. War of the Worlds was to be style versus style, so this is before mixed martial arts. I thought these guys were some version of Tough Man. Initially, that the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, whatever, Gracie boxing, Gracie karate, I didn't really pay that much attention to what the martial art was. I thought these guys were just ready to fight anyone. Then I came out and I saw the dojo, and I wanted to do the deal, and I had to sell it internally. So I went out and I met with Horian and Art and met everyone at Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and it turned out they were throwing like an investor meeting, and I thought it was a get-together to meet more of the folks at Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And Art said, by the way, if you wouldn't mind, if you just give a speech about, how you want to develop this. In the speech I gave, it was a good speech, I said we were going to do a minimum of 3. And it was funny, because one of the criticisms that I've taken personally, it's said I was looking for a one-off. And that was literally, it's the polar opposite. I needed something that was going to work over and over again. After you market something once, you've spent the money. Then you need to get the return. It's not unlike the movie business. There's a reason why there's Spider-Man 3. I knew it was a franchise after I took Horian to Smith & Wollensky. A guy that's willing to fight anyone, whose father chased around Joe Louis back in the day when boxing champion Joe Louis was, the biggest thing. And then, he's chasing Tyson. It was obvious. It was a cast of characters that was really coming together. I like John Milius a lot. He's an unsung hero of the UFC. His ideas behind the UFC helped really form it. I disagreed with a lot of what he said. He, for instance, said the big guy should never lose. But the Gracies weren't the big guy. The Gracies were the little guy. And that was, I think, what seemed to be the element that was going to explode, right? If you looked at the lineup of UFC 1, you would not have picked out Hoist to win. Now it looks obvious, right? Now it looks so obvious, a blind man could see it. I tell you the truth, I am a total acolyte and fan and devotee of the Gracies. They're the greatest. It's if the Kennedys could fight, they would be the Gracies. You know, they're like charming, good looking, and they're the toughest people on the planet. We knew that the UFC would have a lot of spectacular action, just because when you mix styles like that and sizes, and you don't have rounds and you don't have weight classes, you know, it's an anything goes atmosphere. But I think what really worked for the UFC, what I think drove it, is that the UFC, the early days, the days, you know, IEP'd and, you know, put together, we created heroes. Boyce was a hero. But strangely, so was Chemo. You know? The throne, you couldn't sit on that throne long, right? Because the moment you sat down, once you became the gunslinger, there was another gunslinger coming looking for you. And you couldn't always pick out Tank Abbott. I mean, I'm jumping past one, obviously. But is Tank a good guy or a bad guy? Because he's the most lovable bad guy ever. And I think, you know, Joe Rogan, who is a dear friend, brought him into UFC 11, still there. Joe Silva, matchmaker. Joe won a contest for a super fan contest. Joe would send me yellow legal pad, just before the internet, right? Thank God Joe didn't have the internet then, because my mailbox would have, you know, the technology would not have supported what Joe would have sent to me. He used to mail me yellow legal pads filled with notes. You know, I mean, he was so intense. So you have, I brought in Silva, I brought in Rogan, right? The Octagon for Milius. Milius wanted columns around it, which I thought that was a little bit over the top. I wanted razor wire. Not real razor wire, you know, the fake, the Hollywood razor wire. Maybe that was a little bit too much. So we have the Octagon, we have Big John, we have Joe Rogan, essentially the same production crew that's there now. I think after a couple UFCs, we really put together the creative elements that pretty much are still in place, right? The rules came, you know, a dozen events later. But the creative elements, the look and feel of the UFC came together really very quickly. You know, one is the different one, right? One we had no idea, but then we started to turn it into that franchise very, very quickly. And I think, I gotta say, we created a forum, we created a showcase for heroic action, you know? And almost every fight was heroic in some way, you know? And I think what we did is we found these guys and gave them a chance to do what I think was universally seen as absolutely fearless.